Welcome to Rooftop Conversations with May. And today, honestly, okay, I can't even imagine how to describe this person I'm about to interview today. She is one of the most accomplished people that I've ever met, and this is like, if you need to find someone who's like the perfect textbook definition of an organizer, an advocate, and someone super passionate, but also not has to kick like butt while in karate, this is the person you need to talk to. So my guest, I would love to welcome my dear friend Jaslin. And okay, I'm gonna mess up your last name. Oh my gosh, should have asked you that before. Kaur, right?
That's it. Yep.
Perfect. So Jaslin, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself because you're probably gonna do a much better intro than I could ever do about yourself.
Awesome. It's super great to be here over Zoom. May, we've known each other for I don't know how many years now at this point. It's really awesome. So again, my name is Jaslin. Queens born and raised from New York. I'm an organizer who works a lot in the realms of anti-sexual violence and also in immigrant rights work. And I'm really excited to be here and talk about life, talk about organizing, talk about work, talk about whatever you want, and just catch up because it's been a long time and I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we've known each other for a while. So this leads into my next question. So how did we meet? And I'm interested to hear your account of the story. And what was your honest first impression of me?
I can't believe saying that, oh, it's probably in like my sophomore year of high school is easily like 6 years away or like 6 years ago, which feels so long, such a long time. We were both in Model UN and we were at a conference. I can't for the life of me remember which one. It might have been City College. But there's a thing in Model UN where you can pass notes to each other to kind of help other delegations. You're representing a certain country, and you can just pass a note to like pass on some information or get to know the other people or just like bump something that you really want to know about. I forget who was representing United Kingdom, but me and my partner had like passed a note and we were going back and forth about like, oh, do you like One Direction? Back when that was still a thing and people still stand them because we were big like Zayn Malik fans and I personally still am, and we were passing notes and we just we bonded over One Direction, and which is the most irrelevant thing you could possibly think of within a Model UN conference that's talking about like serious humanitarian and policy issues. We're gushing over a boy band, so that's how we met.
Honestly, like that's what like Model UN is for the most part. Like, okay, as much as like as a serious like aspiring politician that I am now, or someone who's like definitely more committed to organizing and advocacy. You know, back in high school, I joined Model UN. Well, I first joined Model UN because I like to argue, and I wanted to do something constructive with arguing. My second year, when I found out that Europeans are coming in and these hot guys from like all around the country came in, I was like, this is my chance. It's like 15-year-old me had like other intentions, but like, yeah, they weren't like the most constructive. Yeah, I used to go to Model UN just to like flirt, which is not good to say. Like I never
Didn't we all?
Didn't we all? Exactly. But we used to pass notes. Like people would pass notes about like anything and like dirty. Like people would make like dirty jokes and innuendos. Like it was so weird. But anyway, yeah. I sorry to cut you off there.
No, I mean, I remember there was always like people would like Google lists of Model UN like pickup lines where you just like, oh, can I see Djibouti? Like it was so corny, but we all bought into it.
No, I like wrote one. It was like to somebody from Chad, and I went, I want some Chad in me, and like I still remember that, and people thought it was the funniest thing ever. Like, so there was one like conference I went to where they read like all like the flirty notes, and then someone goes, "Who wrote? I want some Chad in you," and I was like, honestly, I mean, looking back, I wish I definitely took it more seriously than I intended to. I like definitely would look great on my resume. I clearly couldn't use, you know, me trying to do that and act like a fool on my resume. But I mean, you know what? I have my thoughts in the UN now, and you know, it's all good. It's all good. So, like, your first impression of, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I remember just being like, wow, she's like a dynamic speaker, like really awesome, like a go-getter.
Really?
Like,
Did I even say anything like constructive back then? Like that's what I'm like trying to think.
I mean, like, I was the type in Model UN where, like, I was able to make, like, a good enough, like, argument or speech, but my heart was racing beforehand. I was like, oh, she must not be nervous at all. Like, she's I love it.
You know, it's the opposite. I would never prepare. I did not know what I was saying. I just went up there because I loved the tension. I honestly, like, I went in for the wrong reasons. Like, I really wish they would have gave my spot to someone who deserved it more, but it's okay. Young me definitely needs to get her priorities together. But yeah, no, and it's interesting because you're saying like now like you were nervous in Malyuan, but like you're like one of the fiercest debaters I know. You're someone who gives all these workshops and like you're literally a celebrity. Like you're like not a celebrity, but like more of like but actually doing something about it to me. So like I want to ask like so you know you and I met in high school. Then you went to engineering at first, because we actually met in college again. But then you're like, no, not for me. Let me do something I really love and I'm really passionate about. Where you did decide to go to a career in like women and gender studies, and more focused on an advocacy work and organizing and like something like something along those lines, as opposed to doing engineering. So I would love to know like what got you into that track. Like why organizing? Why create advocacy? And like what got you there? What led you to that like passion?
Yeah, it was really incredible to like, oh my god, May is literally in the same school. Oh my god, this is so awesome. And you were probably like the only person I knew who was already there. So like, you know, we had bonded over like STEMinist at NYU, which is super cool. And so you could already see that there were things that I cared about in terms of social justice issues, because I was, you know, concerned about like women's representation in engineering schools. Do we have resources for people of color, especially women of color here? And we were trying to foster that environment. But, you know, all this background in Model UN and all of this background in learning about issues that are happening and teaching them to my own like Model UN club, I was slowly starting to realize that like, okay, maybe I don't really care about the engineering component. I was really good at like math and science, and I really excelled in those fields, but that wasn't enough of a reason to be like, oh yeah, let's let's go for this. But of course, you know, being an Asian kid, it's like, you know, your options are lawyer, doctor, engineer. I'm sure you know. Neither of us walked out actually using our engineering degrees, so it's fine. Everything's fine. And so I remember I took this class in my second semester because I was just feeling so uninspired. Like I wasn't learning anything that I really cared about. I was able to like do the calculations and everything, but like it didn't sit with me. I remember like sitting in my civil engineering class when we were talking about like, you know, degree of error in like calculations and how you could like lose your engineering license if like your calculations are off by like a 0.01 decimal. I was like, I don't care about this. There are people out there who like don't even have the most basic resources like housing and shelter and water, right? These are things that I learned about through Model UN, right? Or I just know from personal experience. And so, you know, I took this class. It was we talked about this. I remember it was gender and national identity. It was that I don't know, what was like the NYU like grad program?
It was the what is the it's a dialogue, the inter something dialogue. They have like
a dialogue.
Interlude, yeah, intergroup dialogue, that's the word.
Yeah, so it was just like a 1 credit thing that you could take with like 2 like grad students who were like facilitating, and that was where I really started to get my start and understanding of like what, you know, what is my identity, why and how do I identify the way that I do, and like how does that impact how I walk through the world. And so personally for me, it was bringing up a lot in what I went through in like towards the end of high school. I had my own like experiences with like gender-based violence and domestic violence, and that just, I never had a space to process that exactly. I was literally in the middle of like SAT prep, you know, you have to do all your college applications, all these things that were way more expedient than having to deal with your emotional trauma. And like the ways that we talk about like mental health, you just compartmentalize it and you just never address it again until it becomes a really traumatic thing that gets triggered, which I think is just incredibly unhealthy. And there's like a whole thing about how like our Asian American communities do or do not talk about mental health. So that was like unpacking a lot for me when I didn't even expect it. And I remember just like furiously sobbing because someone had said something that was just so offensive about like the state of gender violence in India, which is where I'm from, and that just kind of like launched into this. I really started to think that like, okay, I am definitely not in the right discipline at all, and this engineering degree wasn't serving me at all, and like because of like trauma, because of like affordability and access, so many layers of I guess of problems I was having in the engineering program, I started like failing classes, just straight up like I was pulling like 40s on tests, and I know in like engineering, it's like, oh yeah, that's okay, that's fine. I was not doing hot at all. I ended up being on like probation, and I had the option of like, oh, you can appeal your probation, no problem. But like my second semester, I was just like, I had a meeting with like my advisor and then like a dean, and I was like, bro, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this. And they were really trying to get me to stay. And I was just, this isn't what I want to study. This isn't what I truly care about. And I can't feel motivated. And I'm sure there are people who've gone on, my friends who've graduated and done amazing things, but it wasn't for me. And I wanted to make an impact in significantly different ways. I didn't care about, the calculations and dimensions of building a new bridge. I cared about that there were people who didn't have that, who didn't have like paved roads, who didn't have secure housing, who didn't have potable water. I cared more about the access issue than like actually building and designing the infrastructure to begin with. So I just up and left. I quit. I dropped out. I dropped out of engineering school. So that's how that happened.
Yeah, definitely. And like honestly, I agree. I think like sometimes like you just know in your gut when something's not right for you, and like it kind of does suck that like you said, for a lot of Asian Americans, you are kind of like. I mean, I get it. It comes from the mentality of like most Asian American like folks, they have parents who are immigrants, and like when you think of like working hard and making money and in like to kind of instill like generational wealth or start up generational wealth in a new country, the jobs you think of are like lawyer, doctor, engineer. I didn't even get the lawyer option. Like I only got doctor option. So it was like, yeah, okay, great. Thanks. But like, so like I get it. I understand like what it's like. And it's a risk. It's a risk you gamble with between like, yes, like making your parents happy and making your family happy or whatever. Mm-hmm. And also following your passions and like preserving your mental health is so important as well. So like, following engineering school at NYU, you decide to, you're like, no, I'm done. But then you start over again at a community college. And a lot of people, don't really understand like why community colleges are so important, why they're so vital in providing many folks with access to, affordable education and also local education where they can just go nearby their places, like, their residence. My mom is also a graduate of a CC, not here in New York, but in Cali, and that allowed her to start her career, as a special education teacher now. But she did start at a CC as well. And my mom, she recently just came from Thailand at like 16, and like going into a CC was like the best option for her at the time. So like money wise and language barrier wise and access wise. So I do definitely know that CCs play a great role in providing education, and I just want to know your experiences of like going to a CC. What was that like, and why are CCs, like community colleges, I keep saying CCs, but why are community colleges so important to higher education?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's the best kept education secret is what I always tell people. When I was in high school, and I wonder if you had the same experience too, like no guidance counselor ever told me about community college.
I had this. So this is my advice. I got so I worked as a youth advocate in high school with like other young like peers like around my age, and there were folks that have already gone on to college. So I used to get my college advice from them, and I had a coworker of mine who was a year older than me, and she like had already gone to college, and she told me, she's like, listen, if you need to go to a community college to save some money, do it. Like, enroll in community college, save some money for the first 2 years, you get the same classes, and you can graduate and transfer to another school. I brought that idea up because I kept thinking money. I was like, oh, I don't know, like, money, can my parents afford this, whatever. I went to my guidance counselor. I got hit with yeah, but you're too good for a community college. You know what I mean? Like, your grades are, like, very high. Like, you could definitely, like, look into something better, which is not I understand what the guidance counselor was going towards, but it was like that stigma of community colleges and like the way people look into that kind of education, which is kind of wrong in its own right. You know what I mean? So that's the advice I got.
100%. You're likely to never hear about community college unless you have significantly compromised income, if you're like very low income, or if you're just not performing well academically. And that is usually the case for a lot of like youth of color in particular. They usually get pushed to community college. So for me, like after I dropped out, I like enrolled in this like basically like a feminist boot camp over the summer. It was a summer school of women's activism, and you actually learned about like the history of women's activism in like a global context. You got to learn about like women resistors and like God, what was it? It was like in the Korean War, and you had a lot of women who were being sexually exploited. You got to hear about indigenous uprisings in the U.S. or on U.S. territory, and so it was really fascinating for me. This was like the first base I ever learned about organizing, where I learned about strategy, where I learned about like the history of activists who came before me and like kind of like set the foundation. And so I was like, okay, it's pretty clear what I want to learn about here, right? I want to learn about women and gender studies. I want to learn about like politics. And so I enrolled in community college because like I was really just itching to learn after that. I thought like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I don't have any options. A lot of even like CUNY and SUNY would be like, oh yeah, you can enroll in the following spring. We can't take you right now. And I was like, I really don't have that option right now. I'll have like a semester's worth of gap with nothing to fill in. But with community college, it's just rolling admission. It's a pretty quick process. Incredibly nerve-wracking for me, just like jumping back into school and something I'd never done before. But like because of like my situation, I never had to pay a penny out of pocket or even take out a single loan throughout my entire time in community college. The application was like relatively easy. My only qualm is that there's like a little bit of a lack of institutional support. It's really hard for them to have the capacity to handle like 20,000 students, especially when like the funding can be really, really compromised. But community college just like it gave me all the flexibility I needed at a time when I was really just like drowning in a lot of like in like a huge puddle of just trauma, of like educational fallout, anxiety. And so I was able to just like take courses at my own pace. I took only 12 credits like every semester. That was pretty much it, except like the last one where I kind of fumbled the bag and had to like take like 18. But I was able to be really close to home. Traveling to NYU took me like an hour and a half every single day, 3 hours total, and that was just not working out clearly. So I could take the classes I wanted to. Like I was just in a general like liberal arts degree, so I got to like dabble and pick a lot of different courses that I wanted. My first semester was like human rights, women and gender studies, sociology, and like an intro to poli-sci. It was everything that I could absorb, all this like introductory knowledge about the things that I really cared about, but put it in like an academic context. And the courses were pretty flexible, like class size was so small. I remember being in like 200 people lectures for like a Chem 101, but even like a sociology 101 at community college, it's like 25, 30 students maybe. So it felt really familiar to me. It wasn't as much of a jarring change from high school because no one really prepared me for that going into college. I didn't know about that. And like you meet such a diversity of people in community college too, which like even gets to the point of like, oh yeah, it's only people who are just like underachievers and don't really have any goals. Like, of course not. I've met so many incredible people at community college. I've shared classrooms with like 60 and 70-year-old people who just want to come back and like learn something new. I've shared classes with moms, with working students who are just my age too, people who are supporting their families. Just an incredible array of just fascinating people who are doing so many amazing things. But community college was not only the most convenient thing, but also the most affordable thing that works with like a work schedule and life schedule. Because like, let's be real, not everyone has the privilege of like committing to like just being a full-time student. That's just not the reality for a lot of people.
Definitely, thank you so much for sharing that insight. Like I never knew that about community colleges. I knew that they had like a lot of like as Julie said, like the affordability part was like one of the things I like knew about community colleges. I understand that it was like a more accessible path for a lot of like more accessible place for folks to get education, but I never really knew about like the heart of community colleges. Would you just kind of explain like getting to know the diversity of people, getting to take classes you really enjoy, and getting to really dabble in the like different classes without having to have these like strict rigorous like like NYU had a very strict rigorous like curriculum, strict rigorous like course schedule. You couldn't really go and take this and this and this. But I think with the CC, you're allowed to do like human rights courses, sociology courses. If you want to do like a math course, like let's go ahead and do it. It's like it seems very flexible, very affordable, and very like it allows you to kind of explore yourself more as opposed to a traditional like 4-year university or 4-year college. Which like goes to my next question about CCs. Like you do a lot of activism about CC support, because you did say like unfortunately funding isn't there, institutional support isn't there, and that's not necessarily the fault of the CC. I think it's a lot of like stigma with community colleges, and like that comes from, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, like a classist mindset about community colleges in a way that doesn't allow them to get the funding that they deserve. One of the things you talk about is like Title IX and community colleges. I know you did a lot of great work on that. So why is that important? And then this is going to segue into your work as an activist doing Title IX work and all of that. And like, what was your experiences with that? Your challenges, your biggest challenges with doing Title IX work and activism, but also like your achievements, because we got to celebrate your success as well.
That's right. I mean, like I feel like it even comes down to like states and the federal government just not wanting to offer free education, right, and access to that. CUNY used to be free, Cooper Union used to be free, and now we're tacking on and getting tuition hikes like every single year at these institutions that should be publicly funded, honestly, which a lot of people have feelings about that, but education is just education's a human right, and everyone should have access to it, and it shouldn't be a financial barrier, right? So it's absolutely a class issue, like you said. And so I think that for me, as someone who is just starting to get into like organizing language and starting to get to know people with like the women and gender studies like program at my community college, we had so much incredible support for each other. Like people really just cared about each other in a way that I hadn't seen in like an engineering setting. And people were really intentional. People wanted to share information. We were like all watching these like cool videos together, so we bonded really quickly. So I got involved in the Women's Student Association there, which is super awesome. We got to like talk to students about like some of the most mundane issues. We talked about the Brock Turner case even at Stanford, and now Chanel Miller has like released this incredible book and shared her really like riveting story about the fallout from that as well. So we were having these conversations that a lot of people weren't being asked about to begin with. We were breaking down topics that were in the news, things that were on social media, just having these like even casual conversations like this where people could just have the open floor to learn about new things and just talk to each other in a really like plain and simple way without getting academia like bogged down into it. So I started like following a lot of like groups, following a lot of like organizations that were doing this work too, because like gender-based violence is really big to me. And so like literally just like on my Facebook feed, or it's probably Instagram or Facebook, I learned about Know Your Nine, and they did a lot of Title IX work. And if there's anything that I learned about being at a community college, like I have a lot of like friends and colleagues who are disclosing the violence that they were facing on and off campus as well. And it was clear that there was like a temperature where there wasn't really a framework for accountability at my school, and there were like really particular challenges if you were a survivor of sexual violence in any capacity or any harassment, because oftentimes it happens off campus. We actually do have like a campus at my community college, but it could be in the parking lot, it could be at the mall like 10 minutes away from the campus, it could have been at your own home, it could be where you're renting. We didn't have dorms or anything on campus. That wasn't a thing for us in community college. So there were so many, and if you had experienced sexual violence, like there were so many more barriers to continue your education. So like in our spaces, we often say that like survivor justice is education justice, because if you're dealing with so much trauma that you can't even go to your classes anymore, then you're being incredibly jeopardized with even being able to complete your degree. But if you drop out of classes, You lose scholarships that a lot of low-income students can't afford to lose. You lose a seat in a class that was probably, not going to be available again at 6 p.m. when you needed it after work the next semester. Your schedule isn't as flexible to make up for that. And because you're working, you don't have time to go see a mental health counselor on campus. There are so many other things that take priority, and so many other class-based challenges that come up with sexual violence for a lot of low-income for a lot of community college students, and especially like the majority of our students being like Black, Latino, and Asian and immigrant. There are just so many other like cultural barriers that I know people are dealing with around like disclosing and reporting. People don't want to deal with the police, and the school system is like really hard to navigate. So what do? You end up dropping out, not completing your degree, and so now you're stuck when you were originally on track in like a really affordable opportunity. So that was just, incredibly awful for me to learn about from people I was talking with. People were disclosing things in the Women's Student Association Club. And so it got me to thinking that, like, okay, we have some serious barriers to address. And there are ways that our school is either not responding, or people are just not being held to account in a way that, like, survivors really needed at the time. And so, the Me Too movement was really rolling out at that time too. So a lot of people were having really difficult conversations around this. So I learned about Know Your Nine on social media, and they had like an organizer / like activist training in DC, and I was like, all right, let's go, let's figure this out. I'm like a freshman again, like the community college. I'm like, let's learn about this. I didn't really know anything. I didn't know Title IX was even a thing, but now I know that it's like a federal civil rights law that provides guidance on, the law centers mostly around sex-based and gender-based discrimination in schools, but it provides guidance on how to handle sexual violence on campuses, K through 12 and in college. So that was like incredible. I spent like a weekend with like all these other incredible activists from like across the country, and like the volunteer leadership there too. And so from there, I learned a lot about how to do the organizing, learn about the background of the policy, and then we're looking for volunteers to come back. We're like Know Your Nine is like a fully volunteer run like group. We're just a bunch of scrappy people who only meet like twice a year ever. So we're very familiar to digital organizing. It's not as hard as it is for us now that we're in COVID. But yeah, I just joined, and I was like, all right, it's going to be really, I felt really pulled and called to like go back to my community college, make sure other students learn this and bring back that knowledge. Because I think when we go to like these conferences or trainings, we hold that knowledge and don't spread it to other people. We don't share that. And I think that's an incredible gap that I really wanted to really fix.
Yeah, definitely. I think honestly the best type of activism work is the grassroots organizing, is like the full base off. But that's the work where like it really does like mean something. You know what I mean? And I agree. I think like first of all, dealing with institutions dealing with folks who are survivors, it already is it's horrendous, right? No matter what school you go to, whether it's like an Ivy League, a top 15 school, or a community college, it just sucks across the board. You know what I mean? But like, when you don't have like institutionalized funding, it makes it harder. When you have an administration who clearly hates everybody that's not just white hetero man, it makes it harder. It's very difficult. And then I'm not saying like, this is a women's only issue. Men also unfortunately do face domestic violence issues, do face, sexual harassment and all of that. But it's like they're like, the protections aren't there. And it's this is a problem that precedes Trump as well, and I hope people know this. This is a problem that's pre-Donald Trump administration. But and it's so important to have activism and organizing work, because while the brunt of the labor should never fall on those who are most affected by it, unfortunately, people that's the only voices that will have to be listened to, because and the people have to demand it and things which sucks. It shouldn't have to be that way, in my opinion. But it really does suck that it has to be that way. So I really commend the work that you do, and you're such a good vocal activist on and off campus, and you do so much to give back to the community, whether it's your CC community, your Queens community, your friends community, and just speaking as a great activist. I think honestly, more than ever, we need protections from for survivors, and like some type of survivor
Mm-hmm.
relief fund, mental health for accessible mental health like resources
Mm-hmm.
for survivors, because
Oh
therapy is
yeah.
expensive, co-pays and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. It's not accessible and it's not inclusive. You know, I have my own issues with like, I think I've heard of like therapy being like not inclusive or, you know, intersectional field in its own, but I think that's another issue
Yeah.
to talk about. Um, you do mention that like, you know, digital organizing has been a big part of your work, and you know you're not and everything. And like, so when you think organizing, or when I think organizing, I think like on the ground, like everyone's gonna go like lobby, protest,
Yeah.
knock on doors, canvas. It's very like sociable. Like you have to be like in front of somebody. You have to basically literally walk around neighborhoods, talk to people. But obviously, with you know, the situation with COVID-19, that work, well, at least the like going out part isn't really, you know, like something that you could do anymore. So a lot of, you know, organizing I've seen so far has been flipped over to digital organizing. So I would love to hear about your experiences about that. Like, how has it been like to continue that fire of advocacy and organizing, but in a different type of setting now? Which is, and
Mm.
when I say different type of setting, like it's like through an online setting at this
At
point.
home on Zoom. Yeah, I mean, like when I got my start, it was the same way. You would travel to go somewhere. When I started out in community college, I was like going to DC for trainings a lot, and we would do a lot of like congressional lobbying too. And you would be there face to face with people. You would do your talking points, and even that was like a thing of like, all right, this is now me starting to get comfortable with saying, yeah, I'm from a community college, and not being ashamed of it too, which is like a whole other thing as well. But like it's you go to like rallies, you think of going to protests. The Women's March like happened for the first time when I was in community college, which like I have my reservations about now. We can talk about that too. But it's people think that just because things have shifted online that there's no longer a capacity to do the organizing, and it's a major blow to how we communicate, because um, the way you sustain organizing is to build community with people, meet up in person, share food and break bread with each other, go to these meetings after work when you're exhausted, and this is what gives you life. This is the bread and butter of your life, because it sustains you. It helps you. Good organizing makes you want to come back every other week, right? And makes you want to be there with people who are now like entrenched in the same sort of struggle. I had a professor at CUNY who would always tell me that like solidarity is committing to struggling with another person, right? Committing to doing this difficult work, sitting through it, and just like butting heads sometimes, but doing it because it matters, and doing it because like the bigger goal is more important. Like the liberation and justice component is way more important. And so for us, especially at Know Your Nine, I mean, the rule on Title IX that's been finalized from the Department of Education with Betsy DeVos, that was so strategic, because we've been waiting on that to be finalized for so long now, for months, up to a year now, I think, or over a year now. We've been waiting on that to be finalized, but they've chosen to finalize it in a time where we're in the middle of a global pandemic and everybody's at home. So you can't storm the dean's office. You can't go to the president's office. You can't occupy you can't occupy any places on campus because everyone's at home. What are you gonna do? Like put a rally over Zoom? Like that's not that's not something you can do. So they know when we're at our lowest organizing capacity, and when they introduced the rule, they put it out during finals week, when pretty much every student was just like, I can't do anything. I'm not getting any sleep. I can't show up to a meeting. I can't occupy anything because I need my grades. I don't want to get suspended or expelled because I was doing something and trying to stand up for my rights and the school retaliated against me. So we've been hosting online webinars. We've released like digital toolkits. We've always been really awesome about making sure that all our tools are just easily accessible on the website. Our full like campus organizing toolkit has always been on the website. People are really like savvy with like social media now these days too, and like getting in on Instagram, Twitter. And this isn't to say that like, people think about how like digital organizing, like, oh, it doesn't live on social media. Like you can't be Twitter fingers all the time, but this is what we have now, right? So we've been doing a lot of awesome webinars, talking to people about what their rights are, because the rule is like 2,000 pages long. And I know in your day, you've probably read like super like way over your head, like legal documents that just like are hard to understand by the average person unless you're in law school. So you would be way more equipped to understand that than I would. But yeah, we've been, trying to make it easy to understand for people, putting it in these like graphics of like 9 things you got to learn about, you need to know about Title IX. Come to our 1-hour workshop. We're putting out like a summer boot camp so where people can join us over Zoom and we can still do trainings. We don't want to lose that component. Like just because we're all at home doesn't mean we can't still strategize. You can still like storm your dean's office or Title IX coordinator's inbox. You can still blast them on social media, and you can still like just send them like just spam mail all the time. There are ways to still do this, but now we're forced to rely on that more creatively, I think.
Yeah, and I think social media, even before COVID-19, has played a big role in organizing and advocacy. And this is going to be like unpopular opinion, or maybe it might be like a hot take for some people. I say, like, honestly, I rely on a lot of my information from Instagram. And now before you're like, oh my God, she really is.
Yeah.
I feel like mainstream media will tell me like, okay, X, Y, Z is going on. But Instagram will tell me why Black folks are impacted by it, why Latinx folks are impacted by it, why Indigenous folks are impacted by it, why Asian American Pacific Islanders are impacted by it. They're going to tell me, like what MSNBC says about coronavirus, but in a context where I'm able to understand how it impacts folks of color, queer folks, folks who are undocumented, other folks who are marginalized and not necessarily talked about on TV. So like one of the things that like annoyed me was like people on Instagram, like especially Black activists, were already talking about how coronavirus has already impacted Black communities. Like we already know this story. They already know this story. People have already, we've heard this song pre-coronavirus when it came to the AIDS crisis, when it came to diabetes, when it came to asthma. We've heard it all. But it took all the organizing and like the education that we saw online. And then I think a couple weeks later, I hear ABC News like, hey, so guess what? Breaking news. It's impacting Black Americans more than anybody. I'm like, yeah, everyone's kind of knew that like ages ago, but okay. And that's why I think like Instagram, and that's why I say what I've said about like I get my information from Instagram, because I think Instagram tells me how folks on the ground are feeling about, a certain thing. And I feel like this is how I see it. I want to get my information from folks who are impacted by it rather than, Chris Cuomo over there on CNN or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, he's a Cuomo. Is he going to really understand this issue? You know what I mean? Like, him getting coronavirus, I'm not saying that, like, it sucks like he was afflicted by it, but him getting coronavirus is different from someone in Queens getting it or someone from, the Bronx, and that's a different story. So I don't really need to hear what he has to say, but I would, like, love to hear what folks are talking about on Twitter, on Instagram. This is actually, like, social media plays a role in, like, stopping and creating the changes that we need to see. And it comes from, like, not the elected, but the folks who are like everyday folks talking about this, and I think people like to say, oh, social media doesn't matter, this is unreliable. But who is to say what's reliable, what's not reliable? You know what I mean? So that's my hot take on Instagram. I love Instagram. I love social media. I don't care what anyone says. I think it's a great source if you know how to utilize it. So that's my hot take.
It's a good hot take, TBH. And like now what? Now look, we're all on Instagram, right? We're all doing Instagram Live. So how do you look now? Right? How do you look now?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think there is a way, it creates a space for not just, it creates a space for not just X, Y, and Z person, like the Anderson Coopers or the Chris Cuomos, to have that space, or the Kitty Courigs, but it's allowing folks who may not have that, access to traditional media to like let folks know, hey, this is what's going on. We were able to see real community things happen because folks were on the ground taking videos. You know what I mean? We were able to see, learn about the Keystone Pipeline in South Dakota and how that impacted indigenous activism on the ground. We were able to see, what was going on. I'm not going to go into detail because this is still very traumatic for a lot of folks. We were able to see some of the actions that have led up to why Black Lives, the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that. But it's just like, that's why I say social media has so much power and like so much influence, because
Yeah.
How are people gonna know? They're not gonna show this. The news that you see on TV comes from like what people have been talking about on social media for a good like what 3 weeks. Like it's like and stuff I already kind of knew. So it's like I know if that's my hot take. I love Instagram and it's great for the social justice stuff. It's also great for looking at memes. I don't really care what anyone says. I think it's a great resource. But because I think social media does get a hate and the stigma because it's mostly used by like it's like feminized in a way because like women use that as a form of like taking selfies. That's self empowerment and things like that. You don't want to turn it around and make it like, oh my god, social media is for this and this and this, or like, oh, because it's like young people with different ages. Like there's a lot of factors to why people hate social media, and I think, but I'm down for it. I think the best organizing comes from social media. You get to reach like your neighborhood, my neighborhood, the other boroughs around the country. Yeah. So I mean, this is the best resource we have. So I honestly, Jaslin, yeah.
Like, don't be mad because you don't know how to use Instagram. It doesn't have to be that way.
Exactly.
Like, it's such a great tool to like disseminate information, and like it's also like worth it to be said that like there's a lot of like right wing organizing that happens on Instagram too, on social media. Like I understand that, and that's social media and like Facebook in particular has been like how a lot of like misinformation gets spread. We can tackle that with good information, sources from the people who are directly impacted, like you said, right? We've even seen a lot of excuse me, like elected officials and like campaigns moving towards like using Zoom and Instagram Live to like connect with people, because we're always on social media. We're in a pandemic, and a lot of us are at home if we're not like working right now, and we're constantly engaging with digital content, almost being inundated with it, which I think can be like difficult, but we do what we can.
Yeah, definitely. I think social media makes organizing more accessible to folks. Like, let's say folks with mobility issues who cannot, go travel to a place and make that travel hard, or people with like anxiety issues, like social anxiety issues that may not want to go protest, may not want to, hold up a sign or things like that, or even folks who are like, folks who don't want to be like by the police. Like that's a valid reason to not want to physically go protest. So I think social media creates accessibility for everyone who wants to have a say in something, to do something, and to get involved. And we shouldn't discount that as well.
Exactly. And I think it's a way to like connect with people you never would have had the chance to otherwise. Like I've met people over Instagram who are doing like incredible things and like movements and organizations I didn't even know about, but I get plugged in via Instagram. I get plugged in on Twitter to see things happening in live action. People going on live to like document what's happening on the streets, like protests that they're doing. Like it's really incredible to see like how people are using it for good, even though like we're all being surveilled 24/7. Like we all know that. But we're doing
and Instagram knows they've been blocking a lot of activists. They've blocked a lot of I've seen it. A lot of people who are getting removed, even the close personal friends of mine who aren't necessarily part of an organization, but they're saying something. Instagram's like blocked. The algorithm's messed up. Like it's the establishment working up against us, but that's what I say. So let me shift gears into more like, let's say, not a more like, no, it's like it's an equally interesting topic, but it's like something like definitely definitely like kind of veers off the path of the wheel. You talk about karate. So like not only is Jaslin this awesome organizer, I've seen her like she does her thing. Like I see the kicks and the punches, and I'm like, okay. She knows how to do karate. So, like, how did you get into karate? Like, why did you get it? When did you get into it? How did you get into it? And, like, what's that experience like?
Oh, man. I was so young. This is like 10 years ago. A little bit more than that now, I think. My brother actually started doing it before I did. Our parents kind of just like pushed him into a little bit, like, oh, you should do like an activity after school. But like no one really pushed me to do anything like that, which I think is also what it kind of gendered. Like, no one asked me if I wanted to do it. And so I remember he'd already been doing it for like 2 or 3 years by the time I decided I want to do it. I was still like young. I didn't really have anything to do after school. School's pretty much like my whole life. I was major bookworm, like school nerd and everything. It was maybe like after elementary school or something like that. Yeah. So I remember we used to watch this show, I think it was called Human Weapon, where these two guys would just travel the world and learn about different martial arts and like practice with the people who are from that country. So they would learn about like Thai boxing, they would learn about Muay Thai, they would learn about Kempo, they would learn about just like all these different countries, and then they would actually go in the ring and like do a fight, right? So it was super cool. And I remember like one time they were talking about this guy, I think he was a Muay Thai fighter actually, because you know kicks are really important for that kind of like Thai kickboxing. And I know you do your boxing too, which is also incredible. Like let's give props to that. And so he would say he would practice 1,000 roundhouse kicks like every day. I was like, what the hell? How the hell does he do like both legs? He does 1,000. So like I was literally in the room like watching like TV like right over here, and I was like, let me try that out. And so I started like just like doing the kicks over and over again, and I got to 100, and I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. Like wow, I can do it. Maybe I can't do 1,000, but I know how to do this, and this is really something that I felt was like energizing for me. I was like, oh, I want to learn how to fight. So like my brother came home from practice that day, and I was like, I want to do karate. He was like, what? All this time and you never knew until you saw something on TV? And I was like, yeah, I want to do it. So people think that like, oh, you're supposed to have this like huge like eureka moment where you just want to fight back and learn how to fight. Like, no, I was just watching TV, and I had an older brother who was doing it, so we just signed up together like the next day.
That's so cool. And you're like I'm guessing you're a black belt now. You've been doing it for like 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, nice. Oh my god. See, I did karate when I was younger, and like I loved it. I thought it was like I've always loved like martial arts. I think because I was like, my mom says I have a lot of aggression I need to get out, and it's like the only safe way for me. That's why I have my song. Yeah, same. So I've always loved combat sports. It's always been a thing. I did karate when I was younger, but I had to like leave because school schedule got a little too like hectic for me. I couldn't juggle it. But yeah, no, it's so cool. I wish like like I see you do your thing, and I'm like, oh, damn, I wish I could do that again. Like once this pandemic's over, maybe I can go back to doing it. But like I made it to like the third level. You know what I mean in karate, so like it was pretty good. Like I was like almost getting ready to spar. Like I was like, yes, and I had to drop it.
Hey.
But I miss it. I love combat sports. I think like combat sports. I mean, I don't know if you can agree, but like for me, I don't do professional boxing. I definitely do like workout boxing. But I think post pandemic, my goal is to switch into more of like a real boxing thing. Not real. I don't want to discredit my gym, but like, we're going to workout boxing for more like like combat boxing post COVID.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think like for me, combat sports. And I actually had like my friend who's a Muay Thai athlete on an episode too, and like a lot of what we talked about was like it's great for mental health, at least for me. Like I think I love punching a bag. I miss punching like a hard like I have a bag at home but it's so light. So I miss like pump like just like like just like hitting that bag. Like I miss that feeling so much. It brings like joy to my soul, and I feel like you can definitely feel the same. It does.
Oh my god, there's nothing more like like I remember there were like times where I just didn't want to go to practice. I was like, I'm exhausted. Listen, like it would be like finals week, I don't want to do it, but you always feel so much better after a class.
Oh my god, after boxing I'm like I never used to be a morning person. I hated waking up early, but prior to COVID I would wake up at like 5-6 o'clock to make the morning classes. I would like and I'd be so tired. I'm like and afterwards I'm like, yes, I feel so good. The day is mine. Yes. I'm like, yes, it's the best thing ever. Oh my god, I was like, yes, I get it. I understand why people love the gym. I love it. Like it's amazing, and like I think it's definitely helped my mental health a lot during COVID-19. I've getting to be in a routine. I know karate. You have like the katas, like the forms. It's very strategic. It's very like there's not like like it's a lot more mental strategy than people think about. People think it's just like an all-out brawl with. No, it's not. It's like, no. I know for karate, like, there's definitely more of a strategy. Boxing definitely more of like you gotta know which punches to throw, how to throw them, and I love it. I love combat sports. I love women in combat sports. It's the best.
Hell yeah!
Like,
hell yeah!
The best. Oh my god. So funny enough, like of course this happens to me all the time in like every episode because my guests and we tend to have like a great time, and we're like, oh, time's up already. So we're coming up like on our hour. We have like 10 minutes left. There's one question I want to ask you before we wrap up. So I had a previous episode where I had one of my I have two Simpsons fans, like two friends who are big Simpsons fans. I had one on the one-on-one show already, and he did his episode, and you're my second friend. So I want to know, what do you think is the golden age of The Simpsons, and what's your favorite episode and why?
Ooh, you are not going to do this to me. You are not going to do this to me.
Top five.
Okay, let's get real. The Simpsons has had way too many seasons at this point. They need to call it quits, all right? When something's done, you gotta let it go, okay? So I think before, like, maybe we talked about this, right? Like, maybe, like, before, like, season 15 to 20 is when you're getting into, like, the golden age, right? Like, right before that.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you're because my friend said 3 to 8, and I was like, hot take, because all Simpsons fans will kill me for this. I grew up in, like, the later seasons, so I agree. 3 to 8 was a great episode, but those were the ones that really punched you in the soul, whatever. But 9 through, I'm going to say 15, I could tolerate it. There was, like, some jokes here and there. Like, you know, I was like, okay, it's kind of funny. Like, I get it. You know, Angry Dad was, like, a good one. Like, yeah, from, like, the later season. But the ones that do, like, stab you in the heart, like, cut you with a knife, there's definitely, I agree, 3 to 8. Cut you there. So,
the earlier ones, I feel like, are, like, too emotional almost at once. And so I think, like, the later seasons are, like, a little bit of, like, emotional, like, oh my god, but also, like, Homer just being more of, like, a doofus. Like, it's a good balance.
My god, definitely. I think your favorite episodes have to be the Lisa episodes. I'm feeling
Lisa, come on!
Yeah.
I was just thinking about the Malibu Stacy episode.
Oh my god, Lisa, believe in yourself and you can achieve anything.
Don't ask me, I'm a girl.
Let's solve a problem with a big bowl of sugar. That's not even what real Simpsons is. You start talking in quotes. Like, you're like, yeah.
Yo. And, like, the first, like, couple of lines are literally like you and me. It's like, Lisa's like, a hush has fallen over the Security Council at the United Nations. Malibu Stacy takes the floor.
And like, let's solve a problem with a big bowl of sugar. That was me, Amon. That was me, Amon. I'm the Malibu Stacy of Hollywood. Oh my god. Oh yeah, I love the Simpsons.
We were just talking about the Mr. Bergstrom episode too. That one always gets such a fun.
I like, so okay. Honestly, like, I don't think I would ever get a tattoo because I legit have commitment issues on everything. But if I were to get a tattoo, it would be a Simpsons themed tattoo, and that would be one of the things I would get. To say the note, but instead of Lisa Simpson, I'll have like my name, maybe. You know what I mean? I don't know because I don't want my identity out there on my body, like. We're just gonna get the nudes leak out. Like, oh, it's forward because people still don't respect women's bodily autonomy. You know, there's nothing wrong with taking nudes. Nudes are great.
True. We're pro-ho in this house.
Yes, we are. I love it.
I'll just put that out there.
But yeah, no, like the Lisa episodes really get you. Like, honestly, like, and like I was talking with my friend. I think The Simpsons has culturally, like, it was a cultural phenomenon for a lot of people, but I think for me it does hold like a special place in my heart. It's really gotten me through some hard times. I still watch The Simpsons to fall asleep every day. Same. But not as much anymore because I've been kind of riding off my friend's Disney Plus account. I don't really want her to be like, why are you up all night? So I'm like, she gave it to me because I didn't want to pay for Disney Plus, but I want to watch The Simpsons. So she like let me do it, but I don't want her to like be like, really, like your addiction's that bad. But
I love it.
But yeah, before we close, is there anything that you want to promote, like maybe your Instagram handle, Know Your Nines Instagram handle, or just like last words that you want to promote or anything?
Yeah, so I think for me, as somebody who has kind of taken advantage of like social media in particular, I really use my platform to talk about really like incredibly broad issues that or topics that a lot of people maybe don't have the knowledge to break down, especially if they don't have access to academia. So on my stories, I talk about a lot of topics like capitalism. We talked about mutual aid recently, talking about immigration and like a lot of like structural and a lot of structural powers that are kind of at work right here. So I try to break those down and kind of talk about like national and global issues, how like what we're facing at home connects with everything around. they're long stories, but they're really fun for me to do TBH, and it's a way for me to connect with people and like share information that people probably wouldn't have the access to otherwise. And I've gotten really good feedback on it.
They're also really good stories, so please watch till the end. Like I've watched with you. I'm like, okay, she has a really great content. So please watch her.
You know, I just think it's important to like say shit in plain terms, right? Like, you don't have to get bogged down in academia or like language all the time.
Yeah, definitely. So, and then your Instagram is Jaslin. Oh my god, I'm so bad at knowing handles.
It's XO_Jaslin, my first name. So you can follow me on there. You should also totally follow us at Know Your 9. We are Know Your 9, like the number 9. And you can follow us up for all of our updates that we're having and all our digital organizing that's happening over the summer and into the new year. So we're really excited to roll out a lot of really great content in the next couple of months too.
Yeah, and I'll definitely put everything on like your bio so people can follow you, Know You're Not, and like, you know, thank you so much for being on the show, Jaslin. It's been honestly, I'm so lucky. You know, someone had the nerve to talk about Zane, and I'm kind of bitter that he's starting a family with Gigi Hadid, and that should have been my child. But it's okay. It's okay. Michael B. Jordan is still single, from what I know.
You're right. Right.
So second plea: if Michael B. Jordan, if you're watching this, I'm alone. I'm pretty right now.
Slide into the DMs.
Slide into the DMs, right? All right, Jaslin. I hope to catch up with you properly post COVID-19.
Yes.
And thank you for all the work that you do, and I really appreciate it. And you're such an amazing person, and I'm so blessed to know you. So thank you so much.
Likewise, Faye, you're the best, and I'm so glad that you're doing this and putting a little more positivity in our lives and just making sure that we can still stay connected. This is the best. I love this so much.
Thank you.